into the cloud. There we go. So let me share my screen and oops, we'll get going here. You know what? I'm going to do one more thing. All right. So what we began last week doing, it will become our tradition. So we're going to just kind of begin the class with reflecting once more on the question, which is basically, have we had any insights about which variation or version of the question is resonating with us? So we'll do that. I want to just kind of give an opportunity for some extra review from last week, from part 2, chapters 3 through 6, because there was so much. I don't have anything planned other than just to kind of be available as a resource to answer questions. What's interesting about, so I was this close. One of the things we might be able to talk about tonight is, I don't have it currently planned, is to talk about the philosopher Peter Nozick's experience machine, which is a really interesting question about what we consider to be authentic experience. And I'll lead you in another thought experiment, which is the same one I torture my ethics students with. We'll talk about the recipe test in chapter 7, and we'll kind of explore, we'll talk more about agency. Stoicism and Confucianism are both traditions that place a very high premium on how we act as an individual, as opposed to how we act as a community. So we'll talk about that. For those of you who know a little bit about me and the things that I'm passionate about, chapter 8 and the really big picture, once we invoke astronomy, you know there's an opportunity for a detour or two. I am a proud graduate of the United States Space Camp, the real one in Huntsville, not to knock the one at Moffett Field, but I went to the real one. So we're gonna share some great pictures. We're gonna look at the pale blue dot from Voyager 1, but we're also gonna look at some images of Earth from the Cassini spacecraft, which I was photographing Saturn before it did a late stage swan dive into the atmosphere of Saturn. And then we're also going to look at some images that came to us last summer with the James Webb Space Telescope, which is the most effective time machine that humankind has ever created. So we'll look at where Earth stands in relation to everything.
You should have been in the Air Force.
Oh, I would have.
As well as you should have been an astronaut.
If it weren't for my fear of small enclosed spaces, heights, and explosions, I would have been great at it. So, the other thing, and so just as a warning, I'm plagiarizing myself. So one of the things we're going to do, so chapter 8 kind of invites a discussion about, and just as the book does, a discussion about cosmology. What is the nature and purpose of creation? It's not a universal answer, as I think we saw in chapter 8, and I think when we're talking about, one of the opportunities we have in this class is to synthesize a lot of different philosophical traditions, but there's also limits to that synthesis. It's nearly impossible to synthesize a Buddhist understanding of cosmology with a Christian one. And that doesn't mean to say that they hate each other, but for a Christian or for actually any member of the Abrahamic faith, Jewish and Muslim as well, there's this affirmation of creation, right, in the book of Genesis. God saw that it was good, which is entirely the opposite of the religious traditions of India, which for Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Jainism, believe that this experience is the realm of samsara, which is an innately not evil, but a plane of existence that we want to escape, right? So it's hard to be, it's hard to create an environmental ethic when the whole point of the religion is to get out of this planet, right? That's why so many Christian environmentalists want to stop the kind of Christian understanding of we are in this world but not of it. That is a betrayal of any plain text reading of the book of Revelation. Revelation presumes that that God will come to earth. And so it is our responsibility now to make heaven as a close approximation to heaven as we can muster. God will do the heavy lifting at the end, but this isn't some earth we just trash and then leave and go live on a cloud in heaven. The whole point of creation and the whole point of God's new creation is to make this planet a home for God, right? And so even within the Christian tradition, we can see how fundamentally and diametrically opposed those approaches are. So we're going to steal a little bit from my world religions class because especially when we consider the kind of the cosmology of Carl Sagan, I think it will lead us to not just why religion exists at all, but maybe what our religion in particular has to say about why we exist and where we exist, both in a kind of Copernican mechanical understanding of we are not the center of the universe, but also how and where we exist in relative to other people. So I'll do my best not to get us all the way into what is my favorite theological question, which was posed by C.S. Lewis, which is, what would happen if we ever met aliens who didn't eat from the fruit in Eden? Which is an actual essay that C.S. Lewis wrote, and it's fascinating to think about. So anyway, we won't do that. But I do want to kind of start, this is technically still a book club, we're now halfway home. So I just thought it'd be nice to kind of, how are you liking the book? Ask again, does it leave you excited, bored, confused, worried, all of it? What are some thoughts that we have about, now that we're about halfway through the book? And if you're online, feel free to kind of chime in. Stunned stupid is how we're doing with the book. Okay.
A little bit of all.
A little bit of all of it. Okay.
I find it really
Here, I can.
engaging.
Yep. Try and let the folks online hear us.
Because I find it engaging. Sometimes it really boring.
Okay.
Sometimes I have to go back and read it again.
Great. Did you guys hear that online okay?
No.
That's right. So basically, Pat was saying it's a little bit of everything. Sometimes she's bored, sometimes she has to go back and read it again. Yeah. Okay. So Cindy was saying she felt a little bit overwhelmed, particularly in the last two chapters. And I'll say I felt the same way. It felt too big to focus on, and so I didn't know where to look. It was kind of how it left. Yeah. The whole universe and everything in it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that chapter A, I had to go back and read.
Yeah.
Just to get it all straight.
Right. Okay. So there's good things around the corner. Okay, great. Thanks. All right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Romantic. Yeah. Yeah.
Just being, but another kind of happiness is I'm happy, that they fall for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, but, really that is what's lovely of your children. So I kept thinking that happiness is the kind that you carry, the kind that you, when you get a fulfillment, and that involves pain,
Mm-hmm.
but you have.
Right.
And so you do that. And there's a passion.
Yeah.
So that was really.
Okay. No, thanks for sharing. Yeah. Um, yeah, I appreciate that. So returning to the question, and we don't have to spend a long time on this slide, but I always want to kind of broach the topic. Are there any changes or insights to what we think about the formulation of the question, or is there one that we're gravitating to? Yeah, Barbara.
I have a hard time deciding the name, the question,
Okay,
because to me, there's so many sub
right.
things under it, and so it ought to be other questions.
Yeah.
I love to use that word. And I just want to hear more about it and understand more.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Is there a version of has anybody changed what the question looks like for them? Was anybody like, what is the shape of a flourishing life to begin with, but now what is the true life? Has there been any kind of change in affiliation? Is anyone changing their voter ID card? No? Okay.
I think in the beginning, happiness, now that I look at it, it almost seems shallow. The word happiness seems
Mhm.
shallow. Because of the other definitions and how everyone interprets it differently.
Yeah.
And then also the word flourishing. I love the word flourishing because I think that has so much more impact. And I think for me personally, this book has given me a lot of insight, but more than that, I think about it often.
Okay.
I mean, I'm thinking about it during the day. I'm thinking about it. I even think about it at night sometimes. Something will come up.
Yeah.
It does provoke thought, and I find it very, very interesting. And it's not something you can go through.
Yeah.
You have to be in the right mind. I think you have to be in the right moment to read it, and you have to stop if it's not continuing for this.
Okay. Great. So I will say personally for me, what the thing that I've been repeating in my head, I'm not sure how many of you guys remember this line, but at my installation, Brad defined joy as seeing the fulfillment of another. That when somebody else is living that fulfilled life, that's the source of joy in our own lives, which is, I think, much different than happiness, which seems to be much more personally centered than how does joy and what does joy look like? So, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. So this is kind of where we'll we'll do some quick review and, just kind of open up the floor if there's any kind of ongoing questions. So we got a lot of ethics last week. So we had examples of social contract ethics, which means let's let smart, rational people decide what is fair. The Bhagavad Gita, the character of Arjuna, kind of shows that is deontology, which is we need to find the correct set of rules to follow. We're also kind of informed by Kant, who particularly thought that human reason was the way to identify that same set of rules. Bentham, who we returned to in chapter 8, consequentialism, if something is ethical, whether or not it creates happiness or pain. So if it creates pain, it's unethical. If it creates pleasure, it is ethical. Abraham is an example of divine command theory. God will give us the set of rules to follow. And then Mengzi, who is a Buddhist philosopher, comes to represent what we in the West would call prima facie ethics, which is that emotions help us discover our moral obligations. So when we feel bad about doing something or not doing, that feeling bad is a clue as to what our obligation is that we missed or failed to live up to. And if there's any questions in the chat, just type them in. But anything else I can kind of go over? I thought those, what I will warn you of is this is fewer philosophers than we were introduced to in chapter 8 tonight. So chapter 8 was kind of a shooting gallery of ethical theories a little bit, one right after the other. But any kind of review I can assist with? Nope. All right. Sounds good. So, the first kind of question we have is about the recipe test. So there's page 106, there's this quote, agency, circumstance, and affect, then they are the three basic food groups of a good life. And so for those of you joining us online, right as we were gathering, Barbara asked a question about defining agency, which for my working definition is a capacity to understand and decide or engage in a course of behavior and understand what its consequences will be. And so it's almost easier to understand agency by who doesn't enjoy it. So agency isn't just the ability to do something. So a 3-year-old doesn't have agency, right? So, and we tragically, we see this story about 2 or 3 times a year, right? A toddler will find a gun often in his mother's purse, will discharge the weapon, right? We don't take the kid to jail for shooting someone, right? We don't charge that 3-year-old with attempted murder or, right? A 3-year-old doesn't have agency. But what we kind of begin to see is that agency has a spectrum, right? And so there's a difference between a 14-year-old who finds a parent's gun and discharges it as a person, right? But that's still different. And then, what we're dealing with in our legal system is there a point where someone could be tried as an adult? Essentially, we're saying that they had full agency. We've got plenty of lawyers, both in the room and online. They might have a slightly more technical version or definition of agency, but that's kind of my working definition of what agency is. And so let's just open it up to the whole group. Are there other buckets that we could put in this recipe test, or is it really about the things we do, the circumstances we find ourselves in and affecting, and how it makes us feel, or how our actions make others feel? Is there anything missing? This is a I think a way trickier question than it looks like, in my opinion. Yeah. Okay, so it's more of a balance. Yep. Maria, yeah, thanks for raising your hand.
Yeah, well, I mean, admittedly, I read the book many months ago, but I mean, there's a difference between the good life and the meaningful life, right? I mean, these may be the components of a good life, but not necessarily a life filled with meaning. So I feel like this statement is a little misleading if it's supposed to be the recipe for a meaningful life.
Okay. Thanks for that. Any other thoughts? Is it because it's too hard to think of what the fourth bucket could be, or is it, or this just seems, does all of our life really come down to 3 ingredients? I mean, it's almost, it feels too reductive, but I can't expand on it at the same time.
Back to Maria's question.
Yeah.
And see, Maria, do you have an answer for what you think if you've got a difference between meaningful life and a good life? I hope I'm saying it. What would you put in there? Not necessarily a fourth bucket, but swapping out about.
Maria, did you hear that question? So Mike was asking, so if there is a difference between this being a good life and what you would define as a meaningful life, would the food groups change? Would the recipe test change if what we're seeking is a meaningful life, not just a good life?
I mean, I think the recipe may very well change. Because I think that a meaningful life could be led by someone without agency, for example, or someone in poor circumstances. I mean, the good life, quote unquote, is an enjoyable life, not necessarily one that is I just keep falling back on the word meaningful.
Okay.
But a deep and, intentionally led, beautiful life. But a good life is different. A good life is fine. I mean, I think we all strive for that, but it's a different equation or a different recipe for the meaningful life.
Is it agency that is kind of which one is for a meaningful life, which is the least important? Is it agency for you, or like it's circumstance, like you can still have a meaningful life in poor circumstances, or is it agents? Like what is the least important item in that recipe for a meaningful?
Off the top of my head, I think circumstance. I mean, because I think I read this statement and I think, well, if your circumstances are good, if you're secure, or you've got enough food on your plate, you have enough money, those are decent circumstances, right? But I think it's in many ways a life of meaning is not tied to circumstance. There are many people who live deep lives because their circumstances are hard, so I just because your circumstances are good doesn't mean that you're leading you're living on a sort of deeper plane.
Yeah.
Although I think good circumstances allow us to think about these questions. Very often, You know, if all you're worried about are putting food on your table, then who's got the time for bigger questions and living with great intention? So, I mean, there's a balance to be had there for sure.
Thanks, Marie.
I would add one thing to this. And I think we can look around the room and figure out more than this. But I think you put this question to an ever-increasing decade chronological age of person. And time, maybe it's kind of a subset of agency in there. And I don't even know where it fits. I'm just, what I would have told you was a good life at 30, and 40, and 50, and 60, and 70 is not far away. It would continuously evolve.
Yeah. So for those of you online, what Mike was saying was that the answer or the recipe might evolve with age. So if you ask somebody, a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, 40, 50, even in your, not only would they differ by age, but that one person, their answer would change through the years or through the decades. Yeah.
Is that like you're due more to circumstance? What I have about this is, yeah, I mean, if you were looking at those, three items in the food group, with age, as we change, obviously things change for, which of those do you think is more most responsible?
I think it's probably circumstance. And I only share this little point because I've had the benefit of attending men's group for probably, I don't know, certainly 15 years, 20 years, because of I've seen it evolve. When I was showing up, when I was 45, 50, very, very different now. And I've watched this entire set of men and their answers and how they talk about things. It continues to move through time as well. When I look back now, I see things that were, I know were really important to me at one point in my life. And I giggle almost today thinking, really? You know, it's the effect of evolution of wisdom and time and this, I don't know, some triangulation of effects that have happened to my head that see this as constantly changing. I only wonder if I lived to be 100 and I was healthy, what I would see, 30 years from now.
So we'd have a suggestion that fourth is the growth as is the next recipe.
You know, you have to do, in one respect, circumstance might be where you fit in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
You have a good life. You're economically stable and all that, but really, all the things that you would have to encounter and deal with during the course of your life, and those are your circumstances, and you have to make a decision at that particular time based on your knowledge and your experience.
Yeah.
And your best guess of what's the right decision.
Right.
And, you know, to the point earlier, that changes over time.
It's basically what you've amassed at that day, looking at
What you
Yeah.
know at that point,
at that moment.
in the future,
Who knows?
may have a different perspective on that.
When you're in college, what's your choice? I'm gonna cheat or am I gonna be honest about this test?
Mhm.
And that's the difference between moving for,
Yeah.
so you're making choices then. And it really makes a difference, and that's moving forward. You have chosen to be honest.
Yeah.
And who in this room hasn't thought back on something they did and thought, but.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, when it comes to what was I thinking, that brings us right to the Stoics, which is all about what should we be thinking and how should we be acting. So for Stoics, their focus is on the core of agency that no one can take from you. So Stoicism is completely focused not on results. So it's what we would call non-consequentialist in its outlook. It doesn't matter if you win, lose, or draw. Did you try your best? And the book talks about how Stoicism, especially for the inmates that took the Life Worth Living class at the federal penitentiary, found Stoicism incredibly meaningful because it is not focused on ends, right? It's not their value, the value of their life is not dependent on their guilt, right? That it is their value as people come from the decisions they make here and now. And so what I thought we would do is we'd break out in some groups here. And so we've got 2 questions to share with a partner. So when it comes to Stoicism, do we find Stoicism appealing? Does it seem like a useful approach to try and cultivate? Or does it seem limiting, or does it seem freeing? Related to Stoicism is the Confucian notion of interdependence. Your flourishing is tied up in the flourishing of the world around you. Oh, sorry, my hand was in the way. Do you feel interdependent? Right, so what Confucianism is saying is slightly different, right? Stoics, it's all about you personally, your decisions and your actions and your agency. Confucianism is more, you are interdependent on your society, and that we all need to engage in a flourishing life mutually. So what I'd like to do is so here in the parish hall, find a partner and talk about, let's focus on the Stoicism. Do we find Stoicism appealing? Should we cultivate it? Does it liberate us or box us in? And then for those of you online, let me break you out into some breakout rooms. So, and let me see how many people we have. 9, let's do 5. All right, so let's take about 5 minutes and then we'll bring you guys back. For you guys, just turn to a partner. Yeah.
Expressing your emotions. What a difference to
All right, so we got about 30 seconds left, and then we'll be bringing our breakout room friends back in. Welcome back. All right. So let's do a show of hands for our friends online and here in the room. How many of us think Stoicism is appealing? And thumbs up if you think Stoicism is appealing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that's fine. How many of us find it limiting? How many of us find it limiting? Thumbs down if we think it's limiting.
Both.
Elizabeth says it's both. A philosophy. Were you a philosophy major, Elizabeth? Yeah. It reminds me of, I think, near the end of World War II and during the kind of early Marshall Plan era after World War II, President Truman was desperate to find a one-armed economist. Because economists will always say, well, on one hand, well, on the other. So Truman was always trying to find a one-armed economist. So yeah. So what do we like about Stoicism? And maybe we can invite our friends online. What do we like about Stoicism? I saw a few thumbs up. I feel like there's people who are trying to brave to say something.
I like, can you hear me?
Yep.
I like stoicism because I feel like you can take your circumstances and you can be positive in a bad situation. If
Okay.
maybe it's a control thing. I like the control.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie. How many of us agree with Stephanie? It agree. How many of us agree with that?
I think sometimes when you're in a, particularly if you're in the leadership position, you have to make some difficult decisions. And you know they're difficult, you know they're going to influence or impact other people, and some people in a negative way, but maybe other people in a positive way. You kind of have to grin and bear it and make the decision
Okay.
and understand that you might not be seen in a totally positive light.
Right. How many of us found Stoicism to be limiting? What do we bristle against with Stoicism?
Okay.
If you've read Seneca and you look at his life, he ended his life. He was the person, really, I think, that's written more about Stoicism than anyone. And when Nero told him that he really needed to commit suicide, he went and just sat in a tub of hot water and severed his arteries. And I'm always troubled by the extent to which the Stoics can do things like that.
But he's got control.
Yeah, Joellen.
Well, I don't know whether I have the right idea about stoicism, but when I think about it, to me, stoicism is, I think of people in England in World War II, in London. The bombs are dropping,
Mhm.
and all those refugees are putting their nails out in the streets and so on. And yet, all carry on, and that was it. I mean, to me, when you say stoicism, that seems to me that there's something, that you can, 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 that you can,
Okay.
You just keep going because this is the way that civilized people do, and to keep
Your
it
emotion.
all together, you just keep going. And I think that's what I think of
Okay.
stoicism. So I would say that it's not limiting or freeing. I just think it's something that in some circumstances is necessary.
So Joellen was making an appeal that for her, Stoicism feels like Londoners or the English community during the Blitz, right? That with bombs falling and everything else, just kind of the keep calm and carry on mentality. That it's not about circumstances; it's about personal decision to move forward. So, which is a perfect segue to another Englishman who is, for me, the prime example of Stoicism. We're not going to watch the whole movie.
Tom Hammond and Craig Massback back at.
Let me mute it real quick so I can talk over it. So this is the 400 meters semifinals from the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. And what we have here, and I'll just kind of talk over the video. This is, to me, the definition of Stoicism. And so we're going to highlight the runner here. And at about the 200 meter, he tears his hamstring. So does anybody remember what happens next on this race? Nope. It's a way more tearjerker of a story. It's his father. So I'm gonna fast forward. So let me.
A bizarre finish to this first semifinal in the men's 400 meters. Derek Redmond of Great Britain pulled up with an injury halfway down the backstretch. He's fighting off those trying to help him to finish the race in his lane. And now the pain too much.
So eventually, Derek Redmond does cross the finish line, right? And as the commentator says, that's the Olympic spirit, right? But what it also is it's a perfect example of non-consequential, agency-based philosophy of it doesn't matter if I come in last or if I don't win gold. The point of competing in the Olympics isn't to win gold. The point is to compete. And for Redmond, it was to finish the race that he started, right? And what did he do? He tore his hamstring. He tried to hop as much as he could. The pain overwhelms him right at a moment when his father comes out of the stands, and finishing is more important than finishing first, right? This is the prime example of Stoicism for me. And it is, so I knew about the Olympics in '88. '92 is when I became a absolute Olympic fanatic. I love the Olympics, and it's moments like that that really capture the power of competition. Not, the other person I would is Dan Jansen. So I'm not sure if you remember the story of Dan Jansen. He was an Olympic speed skater. His sister died of cancer the night before his race. Slid out on the first turn of the 500 meter race. 2 days later, slid out of the turn at the 1,000 meter. His Olympics were done. '92, same thing, more pressure, slides out, doesn't win at the 500, at the 1,000, also slides out. They move the whole Olympic calendar. He gets another chance in '94. It's a 2-year break instead of a 4-year break. At the 500, he slides out. There's a great piece by Charles Kuralt about how it's not about winning. What you've done has inspired us. And then on the 1,000, on his last Olympic chance, he wins gold, right? And that's a wonderful story because we want to win gold, but the Stoic would say there's just as much value to the 5 slide outs as there was to the gold medal. And so that's what Stoicism is all about. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
But that they really don't pay much attention to circumstance.
Nope.
And yet, that's all part of the situation, the circumstance they're in. But they disregard that in favor of.
So it's so remember in the book, there's the example of when you're making a recipe, there's a difference between a slab of steak with a little bit of salt and pepper versus salt and pepper with a little bit of steak versus, like a Cobb salad, right? We've got a little bit of protein with the sliced ham, the hard-boiled egg, we've got the lettuce, the cheese, right? Stoicism is the steak dinner. What we can control is what we care about. If there's somebody better at us at running, that circumstance, that's fine. As long as we've competed and done our best, cultivated our best, that's what matters most. Yeah, it's just, and it's easier to, Stoicism is more kind of a life philosophy than it is like an ethic. But if it were an ethic, we would just say it's just not consequentialist. It doesn't care about ends. And the problem is that a lot of us care about ends because we can't say like, oh, I meant to send you a birthday card. Yay for me. Right? Like, no, we wanted the birthday card. Like, just because you wanted to send it, we actually care about what you actually do, and good intentions don't. We actually say the opposite, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so is it how we want to base our life? I've got good intentions. It doesn't feel complete. So, yeah, Mike.
What if you look at the limiting part of Stoicism as tempering preparation? Something that's more meaningful. There's no guarantee it can happen.
Right.
If
So,
you allow the pathway, you keep creating the pathway so that could happen.
I think that the problem,
isn't necessarily bad.
right, I think the problem is that Stoicism isn't concerned about where it might lead us. That's the problem with Stoicism. It really is. So it's not like I didn't get that job, but I learned skills that I can apply for my next thing. It really is, you tried your best to get that job, it didn't work out, and it's not, it does try to cultivate, but it's about self-cultivation, not cultivation for something better in the future. That's the frustrating thing to me about it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I was reading, because we were looking up.
Yeah.
Stoics take a more nuanced stance towards emotions than toward external goods like health and wealth. I just found that
Yeah.
kind of a clarification of what the view is.
Yeah,
It's a modern idea according to this book.
right, and I think because emotion, so if we go back to the Olympic runners, they're going to be satisfied with last place.
Because they finished.
Yeah, which is different from, say, every La Miranda parent. No, I'm just kidding. Right now.
We understand.
Yeah, but yeah, they're in a culture that values winning. Stoicism is a wonderful antidote to that, right? It's like, wow, that's something at a wood shop. Like, it's not a bookshelf, it's not, but Is it modern art or is it a bookshelf? We'll never know, but at least you learn to turn on a lathe or something. So, okay, so this is where the self-plagiarism is going to begin a little bit. So I apologize, but I have correctly attributed my sources. So this is the picture that is referenced in the book. So this is taken outside the orbit of Pluto, near the what we call the Oort cloud that surrounds the sun. And for those of you online, there's the pale blue dot. Earth. Everything you have ever known, everyone you have ever loved, all of human history is in those 8 pixels, right? So that's from Voyager, which was launched in 1972. Here's Cassini, which is another great NASA project. So this is Saturn backlit by the sun, obviously. We've got Mars, barely visible as a dot, Venus, and then you can almost barely make out the Earth and Moon system right here. So not only are we insignificant in terms of pixels, but we're also insignificant compared to the size of Saturn. I think we could fit somewhere around 500 to 600 Earths inside Saturn, right? This is the ultra deep field. This is one of the first images that was published off of the James Webb Space Telescope last summer. This looks further and deeper back into time and space than we have ever peered as a species. When you think about the billions of stars in a galaxy and the thousands of galaxies that we're seeing. So the thing to remember about JSW is it's built on hexagonal mirror arrays. So if you see a star, it's going to have a 6-point piece of light. So this is a single star. Every other speck of light or pixels represents a galaxy, right? So this here is a billion stars, maybe. This is a billion stars. This is a billion. You start to sound like Oprah, right? Like you get a billion stars. So when we're talking about and Brad kind of brought this to my attention as we were starting, Eucharistic Prayer C, which we don't use a lot, but we use occasionally, right? The vast expanse of interstellar space. This is what we're talking about. The problem with this is this either constrains or frees us from morality in an incredible way, right? Like we could take and twist. I'm not suggesting that Carl Sagan would suggest this, but if you take Carl Sagan's point to the extreme, is we are a thin film of scum on a rock outside a know-nothing star, right? Anything goes, right? Who cares? We're so insignificant. What does anything matter, right? And I think that was kind of where I felt in chapter 8 is when you set the zoom out a little too wide, you don't know where to look. And I think, and this is where I'll begin to steal from myself, this is where religion comes into play. So what religion does fundamentally is try to do 2 things in relationship to the cosmos. 3 things. 1, explain it. 2, understand our place in it and explain why we are significant. So when we're looking at the world religions, so here is the Festival of Light in Hinduism, the Golden Temple in Sikhism, the Eternal Fire in Zoroastrianism. All of our customs, all of our ritual around religion is cultivating not just an understanding of the universe, but a connection and significance to our existence. More than anything, so my response to chapter 8 is this: humans want to imbue their lives with meaning. And so what has happened over the course of human history is we have tried to understand why our lives have meaning. There isn't a religion that says life is meaningless, have fun, right? There's strains of that in some religions, but that has never been kind of the fundamental religious outlook on life. The question then becomes, do we matter? Right? So Thomas Hobbes described life as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Stephen Hawking, who comes very close to Carl Sagan, says, human life is just chemical scum on a moderate-sized planet orbiting around a very average star in the outer suburb of one of among 100 billion galaxies. Yeah. So is human life cosmically insignificant? Religion offers, I think, the opposite, which is, Hawking also said we are also an advanced breed of monkeys, but we understand the universe, and that makes us something very special. I would argue that our ability to try to understand the context of the universe and our place within it is what makes us a truly remarkable species. But what religion does is bind us to the vastness of the cosmos in a way that gives our lives meaning and fosters a sense of cosmic significance as well. So this is a quote by Rabbi Harold Kushner. Religion offers us a cure to the plague of loneliness by bringing us into a community of people with whom we share what is most vital in our lives. Religious faith also satisfies another, even deeper human need, perhaps the most fundamental human need of all. That is the need to know that somehow we matter, that our lives mean something, and that they count as something more than just a momentary blip in the universe. And so when we're thinking about chapter 8, and when we're thinking about these, the chapter calls it the really big picture. When we're thinking about these fundamental questions of where are we in the universe, who are we, either as a person or as a creation, these orient us to our surroundings, giving us an idea of just what kind of thing human life is. And so I think that this is also the role of religion, is that there is something huge about the universe. Even though we're infinitesimally small, our lives matter, and they matter because we're connected to the cosmos in some way, shape, or form. That is the story of nearly every human religion. And so, what does the universe look like, and what is our place in it? I think we've got 6 different theories, and I want to kind of go over them quickly. I see somebody just typed into the chat. Maria writes, Matt, you might enjoy knowing that astrophysicists who build the big telescopes of today say that they are the cathedrals of our day. I couldn't agree more. So, that and baseball stadiums, but hey. So the first one is someone who, spoiler alert, you're going to hear from again in the pulpit on Sunday. But we've got Julian of Norwich. When it comes to the response of where are we and who are we are fragile, in the fragile, vulnerable world that God created out of love and for love. Who are we? We are beloved but failure-prone creatures made in the image of God and loved without fail by the God who promises that all manner of things shall be well. So you're going to hear that again on Sunday in the sermon. So if you enjoyed Julian of Norwich, that won't be the last time you hear from her this week, I promise. The Sky Woman story represents relationships between species as fundamentally cooperative. Reciprocity, not exploitation, is the basic truth of things. To seek our own gain at the expense of those around us, both human and otherwise, is to live at cross grain with the deepest way of the world. Carl Sagan says, if the planet that seems so enormous to us is a mere dot, what does that make us? On the scale of worlds, to say nothing of stars or galaxies, humans are inconsequential, a thin film of life and an obscure and solitary lump of rock and metal, right? Not entirely affirming. Who are we in E.O. Wilson's view? We are at once saints and sinners, champions of truth and hypocrites, pulled between total commitment to community and an opposite instinct to seek our own good at the community's expense, and possessing a stubborn tendency to privilege our own groups over others. At the same time, because we are highly intelligent, we are the earth become conscious and curious. We are the galaxy come to know itself. So again, E.O. Wilson is the kind of technologist who believes that eventually humankind will kind of merge and be amplified by technological prostheses, I guess you could say. Where are we, according to Ray Kurzweil? We inhabit our biological, wrong thinker. Kurzweil is who I was thinking of. We inhabit our biological bodies and depend in large part on our biological intelligence, but we are beginning to enhance those bodies and push beyond the limits of brain-based thinking. Kurzweil calls this decisive moment of change the singularity, and it spells the end of all distinction between human and machine, between physical reality and virtual. And then lastly, it's kind of it comes to us directly in the book from the Buddhist way of life, but it also, the understanding of samsara is the belief that we are existing within samsara is a Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, and Jain understanding of the world. It is one of a churning, perpetual, cyclical process of cause and effect, birth, death, and rebirth at both the micro and macro levels. The technical term for it is samsara, which is a pretty good candidate for a one-word Buddhist answer to the question of where we are. So that's 6 incredibly disparate theories as to what the really big picture is. So what I'd like us to do now is let's break up into some small groups. So maybe let's do 4 folks, and we'll do the same online with breakout rooms. The chapter lays out very different visions of what the really big picture is. My question is there one that we find most compelling? What makes it compelling to you? The other question is there a version that you could quickly eliminate as not having any claim whatsoever on your answer to the question? So as brilliant a cosmologist, is Carl Sagan's answer, for one example, just too bleak? Is there something that we could just quickly say, nope, this does not describe where I believe I am in the universe? So here in the parish hall, let's get into groups of about 4 or 5, whatever feels most comfortable. And then for my friends online, we're going to throw you back into some breakout rooms. So, whoops. Let me do... Friends, for those of us in the room, I've added I forgot the second part of the question. So what is the single best feature of each of these perspectives? So if you have time, what do you like most about any of those perspectives? Okay. So Cindy, it may be hard to see, but this is the summary, the key passages. So Julian, Sky Woman, Carl Sagan, E.O. Wilson, Kurzweil, and no, but so it's 130, 134, 135, 138, 142, 144.
You're significant when you guys are
All right. So I apologize that I didn't have handouts because I feel like that would have been super helpful with this question to give everybody a rundown of the 6 different theories. So my apologies. Uh, what theories did you gravitate to? Were there theories that you kind of immediately rejected? What theories did you guys spend some time talking about? So what was that? Your age, okay. Their age. So one group became their own philosophical school.
Just get it off the runway.
Yeah.
We rejected Carl Sagan.
Okay.
I like you who are thought that if we're reincarnated as dogs, we have good news.
Okay. 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 So Sagan, so one group said Sagan not so much, Julian of Norwich, which I would expect from a group of Anglicans to gravitate to, but also some Sky Woman, and if we want to be reincarnated as dogs, we want kind masters. That's if you're good enough to be reincarnated as a dog. Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, and also like that invites a question of what breed, right? Like to come back as a golden retriever is a pretty good life. To come back as a Chihuahua, you probably did something. So, hey, I just got, hey, I'm glad I got installed. That was, okay. I apologize. How about a Boston Terrier? French Bulldog? Yeah. I'm glad, I can safely say that's the most controversial thing I've said as rector, is to disparage it.
I have a Chihuahua mix now.
Okay. All right, well, I retract it from the record. So,
People ask me, does my dog have a little Chihuahua? And I said, you don't mention the C word.
okay, well, all right. Well, I already got in trouble. Don't you get into it too, so.
Sorry, Kat.
Yeah. I totally got us off the tracks. I apologize. So one group, yay Jolien, yay Sky Woman, at least kind of not rejecting samsara. What were some other groups kind of thoughts and feelings on where was gravity pulling us?
Away from Sagan.
Away from Sagan?
Sagan for sure. And the singularity of Buddhist name. That was just like
Okay.
too much. Buddhist.
Okay. Okay, great.
I want to be a liberator.
Sounds good. How about online? Any people gravitate towards one theory or another? Oh, you're muted, Stephanie.
No, we did not gravitate to one. We agreed that was perhaps it was all of the above.
Okay, great. Always a safe answer on a multiple choice test. Sounds good. Great. Let me share my screen one last time. So this is this leads us to kind of the last question for the day, which is, and this is kind of where I've found myself today or this week. Are we starting to feel a paralysis by analysis? Okay. I'm going to say if you're starting to there's just too much in the book, you've got some wonderful company. So the first thing I want to say is don't feel like you can't handle it or you're not smart enough. We're all just feeling overwhelmed, I shouldn't say all. Many of us are feeling overwhelmed at this point, and Yeah. Um, the where I kind of want to nudge us to is, are these super big questions, do they feel empowering, or does it just still feel overwhelming? Like, given the whole context of the entire universe and all of creation, do we feel empowered that we have a way forward, or is it like, man, I am infinitesimally small, I don't know what to do next? How are we feeling right now with our sense of our place in the world? Yeah, Pat.
It makes me think about stuff that I never thought about before.
Okay. Is it comfortable or uncomfortable thinking about that stuff? Uncomfortable.
Only because I have to read it over.
I can't manage the world.
Yeah.
I'm totally over that. I feel like
Okay.
getting into a smaller space of,
Yeah.
and decent that she comes, well, words, she's had to stop.
Yeah.
Oh, and that kind of dictionary.
Yeah.
That changes your thinking, you know,
Mhm.
you go along and you say, well, what is this?
Yeah.
That's really different.
Okay.
It takes more time.
Yeah. Susie, you were going to say something?
Well, we're talking about responsibility, and
Okay.
what's our responsibility? We're just little folks and believers. But we still do have responsibility,
Right.
try to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of going on that.
Yeah. I think, what I can appreciate about the book is there were the disclaimers at the beginning of the book that all three of the authors are on the faculty of Yale Divinity School, which is an expressly Christian seminary. And so they all come to us from a Christian background and outlook, but part of their job is to show the breadth and the depth of how human philosophers throughout the world have asked and entertained this question. But I do think what we could stop for a moment to think about is, of the six theories of the really big picture, to concentrate at least for a moment on the explicitly Christian expression of that, which is Julian of Norwich, writing in, I think, the 13th century, didn't have a sense of the cosmic scale of the universe, right? The earth, the sun still circled around the earth for Julian. But her conception of our fragility might mirror our size in the cosmos, but our size, our fragility is countered by the presence of God and God's power, right? And I think that's kind of that's the counter argument to our fragility, is we are a reflection of the God who created us. And so we might be small and insignificant when seen through the eyes of the James Webb Space Telescope, but our size isn't a ratio to our importance to the God who created us, right? There's this wonderful retelling. I'm going to call it Genesis chapter 2.5. So it's this work of imaginative theology where Adam and Eve have been cast out of the garden, and the author is kind of filling in what happened to Adam and Eve in those first few months and years before Cain and Abel were born. And this land was too wet, this land was too dry, that land had alligators in it that were always hungry. And eventually we find Adam and Eve have found a cave above a valley. Adam's able to till the land. He falls asleep exhausted every night, but feels a sense of reward for what he's accomplished in the day. But the story ends with Adam speaking out, and I'll see if I can remember it as close to verbatim as I can, but Adam shouted out his defiance at God, saying, "You know what, Eve, this is how we were meant to live, to work all day by the sweat of our brow, to feel the pains of small accomplishment gained daily. This is what we were meant to do." And the God who created them, who was both at the other side of the galaxy and so close that he could feel the hot air of Adam's breath, smiled. And I love that conception of who God is that God is both remote at every corner of the universe, but also feels how hot our breath is against his own body or God's own body. It's a wonderful, imaginative way to know that we might be infinitesimally small, but we are a reflection of an enormously big God who fills that vacuum. And so I think it's worth reminding kind of where we as Christians kind of can interface with these theories, especially Julian of Norwich, how we can kind of understand our place. We can be infinitesimally small and matter a great deal. To quote another philosopher, a Master Yoda, very influential in my life, size matters not, right? We finally got to work Star Wars into this class, so yay for me. Wonderful. The last thing I want to say is, for as deep and as, I'm trying to think of the right adjective. Reading this book feels like balancing on a canoe in the water, right? It takes a lot of effort to stay balanced, to work through the new vocabulary, to think through all these new theories, to be introduced to school after school after school of philosophical thought. To that, we're going to add an emotional breeze to the surface of the lake in this next week. So what we're going to tackle next week is part 4, which is facing the limits, which is, I don't want to scare you all off for next week and say it's uncomfortable reading, but it will continue to be a challenge. It's going to ask questions about what do we do when we get it wrong, inevitably? What do we do when we make mistakes? How do we confront systems of injustice? And ultimately, it turns our attention to what is a very Christian practice of, when we're talking about what do our lives mean, inevitably, we also have to ask, what is the meaning of our death? What does it mean to be mortal? I want to share with all of you that my prayers will be with you as you read through this next section. And I mean that, honestly. These are tough questions. They might stir up a lot of uneasy feelings. It might just be the easiest thing in the world. Some of you have literally the faith that can move mountains. Some of you have endured an unimaginable loss in your lives. And despite that loss, are sources of joy and laughter and just capable of a smile, which is beyond what I can imagine. These are important, tough questions, but what I want to say is, while we will continue to hear voices from both inside and outside the Christian tradition, what we're going to embark on in this next week is, I think, the most fundamental task to a Christian, which is, what is my life preparing us for? And that is going to invite questions about what is the nature of the life after this one, about the resurrection, what is it we expect What is it we hope to find? These are all fundamental questions to the Christian experience. I know I'm already at 4 minutes over time, so I won't spend way too much more time. But, and I've never done this before, read the book of Revelation, but don't read the whole thing. Just read the last 2 chapters. Because what Scripture tells us about the afterlife is not what people think Christians believe about the afterlife. The popular conception is everybody gets a mansion and you live on a cloud and all of your family's there, right? That is not what the Christian belief of the afterlife is, right? It's also not what our liturgy says the afterlife is, right? We join our voices with angels and archangels and all the company of heaven, right? I hate to break this to you. The afterlife may be nothing more than one long church service. But it is a church service without bad preaching, right? Like it's not the worship we're used to. It is the perfect worship of the God who created all things, right? And so that's, and by the way, that's just like the waiting room, right? That's just the afterlife. That isn't the resurrection. That isn't the moment where God comes back down to earth and is reunited with creation and lives among us in a place where every tear is wiped away, right? Like the worship that happens in heaven is just, Scripture tells us, the waiting room. That's not yet the resurrection. So as we're thinking about, the other book I could lend to you is Holy Living and Holy Dying by Jeremy Taylor, right? To live a Christian life is to consider what our death may mean and to prepare for it. So all of this can be heavy, heavy stuff. And so I say again, honestly, my prayers are going to be with all of you as we try to tackle this together. If it scares you, if it's disquieting or discomforting, give me a call. I'd love to help work you through it and talk you through it. But the important questions only get more important as we move forward this week. So just kind of want to prepare you for those questions. I think you can all get through it capably, but know that I'm here throughout the week if anything comes up and you need to talk to me about it. So, yeah. Yes, Pat.
Do you think that we're entering into the end times?
In terms of like a
Rapture, tribulation?
So Pat asked a question, do we think we're near the end times? Revelation is the hardest book for me to wrap my head around because I have yet to find a way in which Christ as the Prince of Peace would bring violence to the world. That is something that I have a hard time squaring. I just don't know how to work that out in my head. And so this is one of the, we talked about the telescope, right? And reason and tradition. I don't know how to, there is violence in Revelation that I don't know how to make compatible with the Prince of Peace. And so it feels like a cheap exit to say, I don't know, but my focus of Revelation, what I learned from Revelation is that the question of will good triumph over evil has been answered, yes. And so I don't fear how that will be accomplished. And so because I know that God wins, I don't worry about the battle. I'm looking forward to the new creation. That's the short, I know if that feels like a cop-out, and I want to acknowledge that, but
Do you think that the rapture will come before tribulation or tribulation and then?
am I a premillennialist or a postmillennialist? I had a whole class on this in seminary. Scripture is not entirely clear, and so neither am I. Yeah, I know it's a bad answer. There's,
With all that's going on in the world,
yeah.
wars and, Israel and.
Yep. I know it's an absolutely real and authentic question.
And it just seems like there's no morality,
Yeah.
you know?
I think what I would, our modern life is not the first time in which the people of God have looked at the violence and the chaos and the confusion and wondered what is happening to our world and who is in charge. So Revelation is one example of that. The book of Daniel is another great example of God, there are some really awful, terrible things, and we are not sure that you are in control. What is going to happen? And so I draw comfort from the fact that God's people have been asking these questions and have been comforted by the knowledge that God is in ultimate control, and that as awful and as regrettable and as just as, like, that doesn't even begin to describe like what's going on in the Holy Land. Like, awful and regrettable are press release words to talk about violation of our humanity. Acts of violence are representations of sin. God has found a way to conquer sin, and so God will, in the words of Julian of Norwich, make all things right. The sins that we commit against one another, God has found a way to navigate us through and past that sin and bring us together as one creation. That's where my hope is. And so the more I trust in that hope, the less anxious I need to be about current events. Is that almost sounds like a real answer? Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. My apologies for going over. I'll try and stick better to time, but I blame all of you and your guys' good questions. So, all right. Have a wonderful evening, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.